Hey, what's going on, y'all? Y'all know what it is. Baddest Chaplain on the globe here once again. Hoping all is well with you and yours. Today I'm here with my dear friend Kate Enderly. Kate, how you doing?
I'm great, Chris. How are you?
I'm doing well also. Doing well also. It's been a minute, but it's really glad to see you, yo. Really wonderful to
Yeah,
see
yeah, 20 something years to be exact, right? Like,
you. Oof, oof, man.
so,
Probably.
yeah,
Probably.
yeah, if you want to put a number to it.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, that was sobering right there. I didn't even think about it being like that. That was a few
Yeah,
years, but not like a
yeah,
couple
20
decades. It's
years.
different. Absolute, absolute. But I'm really excited to talk with you, particularly about your work with Black and Borderless. So, just walk us through as an audience, like what inspired you to create Black and Borderless? This platform that's connecting African people of African descent around the world. Like, what was the inspiration for that?
I would say I always tell people that me. So a little bit about
Hmm.
my background. My father is an African immigrant, specifically a Cameroonian, of Cameroonian descent. He came in from Cameroon, which is a small country in Central Africa, and migrated to the U.S. In the late '70s, early '80s, where he met my mother, who's um, African American, a Black American woman from Chicago. So I'm the product of literally a transnational collaboration between people of African descent, an African
Hmm.
immigrant parent, and an African American mother. So I like to tell people that I was kind of born into this, right? Like I was,
Hmm.
you know, God doesn't make mistakes, as they say. So
Right.
that's where my inspiration comes from. And because I, have grown with these two cultures, I've had a chance to kind of see the commonalities between the two cultures and
Mm.
also the differences and the nuances. So I think I'm best positioned more than anybody else to really be the person that kind of bridges the gap between people of African descent from different cultures and from different backgrounds. So really, just my personal background and how I've grown up and how I got to live with my grandparents in Cameroon for several
Come
years when I
on.
was younger for 8 years, and then came back to the States. So I'm truly bicultural, and I know how it's enriched my life, and I want to see that same enrichment happen for Africa and the diaspora at large.
Hmm.
Mhm.
There it is. There it is. So when you talk about it enriching, the diaspora at large, like what are the ways that you see it contributing to this, global solidarity, like Pan-African work? Like how do you see it contributing in those regards?
I think one from an emotional, like kind of like social standpoint, there's a lot of healing I think that needs to happen between people of African descent.
Hmm.
Given the history of slavery and the slave trade, and
Yeah.
even in how Black immigrants in the U.S. currently interact with African Americans, or Black
Right.
immigrants in Europe interact with those who were born and raised there or second generation. There are some clashes that are happening there. I think there's a lot of healing that needs to happen.
Yeah.
I think there's a lot of finger pointing that's happening based on our
Right.
history, who
Right.
betrayed whom, and all of
Right.
that. I think from a social standpoint, that needs to happen. But what I'm seeing happen, especially in the last 10 years, that there's an economic shift that needs to happen as well. I think the
Hmm.
most recent things that really um, point to the fact that we need to come together is the recent cuts by USAID.
Right.
The it's not just the U.S. Although the U.S. is getting, I think, the most publicity for cutting
Sure.
foreign aid to Africa, European countries are doing it as well,
Right.
and that leaves Africans trying to kind of figure out what the next move is. How do they
Hmm.
function as an autonomous continent economically and financially?
Hmm.
Um, at the same time, that's happening in Western nations as well for Black folks in
Hmm.
Western nations. As we know here, the rollback of DEI initiatives in
Right.
the West is also leaving people of African descent in the West kind of wondering, like, what's the next thing? What's the way forward for us? And
For
how do we
sure.
kind of create a self-sufficient, autonomous ecosystem for Black people? So I think these two things are happening on the continent and the diaspora, and it's high time. This is the time that we need to get
Right.
together, not just socially but economically. I explain the way I'm kind of talking about Black and Borderless now is not as a social movement, but as an economic movement. It's an
Gotcha.
attempt to create a global Black economy. That's
Yeah.
essentially where it's kind of evolving and where I'm trying to take it.
Hmm.
So I think those are kind of the two things: social, on the social side, which we already kind of know about, but also on the economic side, like it's everything is pointing in the direction of an autonomous global Black economy that we need to create. And this is the time to do it, given all that's happening in the world.
Hmm. Hmm. No, it's. It's amazing to hear you say this because I think about all the ways that it feels like we are being programmed, and what you're presenting and providing is a real counter narrative. Because I see when I used to use Twitter all the time, and there would be like diaspora wars, and people arguing about who has the best jollof, and is
Mm-hmm,
jollof better than rice and peas, and like
mm-hmm.
all these different like
Hmm.
trivial things that like should be funny, but people are getting like real serious about, to your point.
Hmm. Hmm.
And just thinking about the ways in which this initiative that you're doing is happening at the same time as like we're seeing African economies grow. We're seeing African leaders really make some concerted efforts to really make sure that they're controlling their own economy. And when we're
Hmm.
talking about the continent of Africa, we're talking about the youngest continent with the fastest growing population
Yes.
in the world. So it's a
Hmm.
lot of opportunities in the
Yep.
mix for it, for sure.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
so when you hear all of that, when we think about all that, like what to you is like the importance of being black and borderless, right? Like
Hmm.
as we're talking about something that is like transnational, like what does that mean to you on a deeper level to be black and borderless?
You know, literally it means, being able to think about your whether it be your profession, your culture, as
Mm,
something that's borderless, that's not bound by geographic or national borders, right? Because
mhm,
it's not.
mhm,
Black culture is not bound by, the borders of the US or even the
mhm,
borders of the African continent. So I think in kind of the
mhm,
literal way, it's like to think about the fact that your culture transcends borders, and
mhm,
that it's also influencing other cultures in other parts of the world as well. So in that sense, it's borderless. But it
mhm,
also, I think, kind of a more figurative meaning, I guess, if that's the word that I want to go for, is that you yourself are borderless and
mhm,
boundless, in terms of
mhm,
your potential and what you can do. So it has this kind of double entendre. It's supposed to mean literally that, culturally, your culture is not just, US, and that you can reach
mhm,
across borders and connect with
mhm,
people of Black people of African descent from other parts of the world and collaborate with them and build things with them and solve problems with them. But
mhm.
also, it's that you, as a person, you are boundless and you are
Yeah,
borderless. And
right.
when you approach your life that way, you can do really great things.
Absolutely, absolutely. And I really appreciate that because I think about once again how counter cultural that is and how much that counters the narrative of people just, you know, whenever you're a marginalized person, like you're just forced to think about things in a very provincial manner,
Mm-hmm,
right? And
mm-hmm,
so,
mm-hmm,
I think about all the times I've had conversations where we're trying to talk about like whether it was in college and talking about Darfur or or like,
mm-hmm,
previous generations talking about South Africa and just thinking about the ways
mm-hmm,
somebody was saying, well, what does that have to do with me here? Like I'm here
mm-hmm,
in America, I'm here in North Carolina, I'm here in New York,
mm-hmm,
wherever the place may be, and
mm-hmm,
just thinking about expanding, and it feels like a return to that sort of like solidarity across the world that is
mm-hmm.
so needed. It has always been needed, but particularly needed at this time.
Yeah, absolutely. And I always say that solidarity has always kind of been there, but at a
Hmm.
very um elite elitist kind of level. Like
Yes.
African Americans
Yes.
have been going to Africa,
Hmm.
traveling to the Caribbean for decades. If
Right.
you look at kind of the Black Power movement of the '60s and the '70s,
Hmm.
people were uh, taking on African fashion and wearing and going
Hmm.
back, but it was kind of reserved at that time for, I would say, like middle and upper class African Americans to a certain extent,
Yes.
or so-called conscious African Americans.
That part.
What I've observed, like, what I've seen happening in culture in like the last, I would say, like decade or two, is that that's
Hmm.
like permeating working class and
Great.
lower middle class people of
Yeah.
color, not just kind of this kind of conscious,
Yeah.
I want to
Yeah.
go back to Africa movement.
Right.
And that's thanks to social media and digital media. People can
Great.
now, you can go on TikTok and watch someone eating fufu
Come
in
on.
Nigeria in your in your reels, and you're like, well, how did this end up
That's
in
right.
my in my feed?
Yeah. Yeah.
You can see someone talking about their vacation to Jamaica, and then you
Yeah.
now decide that. But you know that information wasn't as accessible, of course, before
Of course.
social media. So now people who didn't even have the means to travel or didn't have the means to even come in in contact with someone, a Black
Hmm.
person of a different cultural background, now have that,
Hmm.
right?
Yeah.
So the movement is like now become a mass movement. It's not just reserved for the socially
Hmm.
conscious,
Right.
elitist kind of Black person. I think that's what's really remarkable about this time, and what makes this time the time to really solidify the solidarity.
Yes.
and now convert that, or transform that into economic power, not just social
Hmm.
power.
Oh, for sure, for sure. I love that you mentioned traveling to Jamaica, because something I see on like my For You page every once in a while is a picture of Dr. King relaxing in Jamaica, and there's some
I've
quote
seen that.
of like he feels the most free he's ever felt in Jamaica, and like
Uh-huh.
Jamaicans are super proud of this notion. It's like the man was free here. You know,
Yeah,
like there's
yeah, yeah,
a
yeah,
lot of
yeah.
that going on. Yeah,
Yeah.
so
I have seen
absolutely.
those pictures actually. Funny enough that you say that. I've seen that.
Yeah.
His vacation in Jamaica.
He looks so relaxed, he's just like
He
sitting in the
does.
pool.
Like in kind of the 1960s fashion clothing. Like you see him
That's
relaxed with a white shirt. Yeah, I've seen that. Yeah.
exactly, exactly.
It's really cool.
It
But
is.
that just tells you that back then that was already happening, right? But again,
Right, right.
Dr. King, one could say, was a
Mhm.
privileged, not privileged socially, but privileged economically or financially
Once
at that
again,
point.
yeah, right.
To afford that, to be able to go to,
Hmm.
like how many black people were traveling to Jamaica in the
Come
60s and
on.
70s.
Right.
But now, I can name at least 10 people in my social circle,
Certainly.
of varying like backgrounds, socioeconomic backgrounds, who have been to Jamaica or are planning a
Hmm.
trip to Jamaica. I think
Yeah.
that's just kind of the beauty of it, is that social media and digital media has made that possible, and also increased migration. The
Yes.
migration kind of boom in the early 90s to mid 90s, from the Caribbean and from
Hmm.
Africa. More people are exposed to people from the
Right.
Caribbean
For
and
sure.
from Africa. They're eating at Jamaican restaurants in,
Hmm.
in Brooklyn and the Bronx
Hmm.
and Chicago. So that also has contributed to it. And I think, again, that's what makes this the exact time to really capitalize on that and build this global black economy that I'm talking about. So
Absolutely, absolutely. What also comes to mind is the sort of uh year of return that I know Ghana had back in what was it 2019, 2021, around that time.
hmm hmm
Just thinking about the ways and of course the programs that many nations on the continent have had to allow Africans to travel freely between states without needing a visa, and just seeing, there
hmm
seems to be an alignment happening with this conversation that we're having, as well as laws and sort of like geopolitics sort of playing into this like economic opportunity to really do business and be with each other, not just see each other on TikTok, but actually physically touch the
yes.
soil.
Yep, yep, yep. There is. And again, that's really a beautiful thing to see. Ghana is kind of, has been the country spearheading that movement of,
Mhm.
inviting the diaspora back, inviting them to not just travel there, but invest there. That's
Yeah.
kind of the second wave, I think, of the return movement, is to
Hmm.
also invest there. And I think other countries are following suit. They're seeing that it's
Hmm.
working, and they're also following
Hmm.
suit and doing the same. I've seen, like, things about Gambia and people,
Yeah.
encouraging investment in Gambia because they're seeing that, what's happening in Ghana and places like that. So
Hmm.
I just think it's wonderful to see. And I think that if we don't capitalize on that momentum that we're building now, we might lose it.
Hmm.
So I think that's it, especially those of us in the diaspora. And if you yourself, you are of
Hmm.
Jamaican descent,
That's right.
are, I guess I would say, a first generation American, right?
Hmm. Hmm.
So you and I, who've grown up here and who are, can claim ties to,
Right.
other parts of the world and I think it's our responsibility to make sure that momentum doesn't get lost and that it gets
Right.
converted into something bigger than what it is. That it's not just a
Yeah.
cultural movement. That it's not just a TikTok exchange,
Exactly.
or a jollof rice or a rice and peas war.
That's right. That's right. That's right. Yeah, for sure. So talk to me a bit about how you believe your work with Black and Borderless is helping to address the historic displacing of people of African descent. Like we just talked about being first generation Americans and having to maneuver that sort of third culture. Like I
hmm
know, like having met you in college, I remember, and you coming from Chicago and me coming from New York, I remember just seeing, West Indians and Africans all the time. Like, and it just was
hmm
really kind of a shock to the system to go to school in the South and be like, oh, y'all aren't used to like different types of black people. Like this
Right,
is
right,
y'all just like the African American was the only slice. And it was like there's so
right.
much more. And I remember feeling such a joy and peace being able to like kick it with African students. Like I remember being on like a group chat with like some Ghanaian students. This is when we still used AIM, and they
Oh
were
wow.
speaking pidgin, and I was like, "Oh, y'all speak patois?" And I was just like writing back, and they're like, "How do you know pidgin?" I was like, "How do you know patois?"
That is
Yeah,
funny. Well, let me share. I
yeah.
have a similar story. So
Please.
I have a really eclectic family, to say the
Here
least,
for it.
right? So my mother's African American, born and raised in
Hmm.
Chicago,
No doubt.
but in the late '80s, she discovered Jamaica. She went on vacation there in like '88
Come on.
to Negril and fell in love with
Yes.
Jamaica and has made it her second home. Really, it's become almost her first home, and now Chicago's her
Come
second home.
on.
So
Yeah,
she
yeah.
spends like 6 months out of the year, typically in Jamaica, and the other six in
Yeah.
Chicago. She kind of goes back and forth,
Awesome.
right? But she's
Awesome.
from Chicago.
Right,
But
right.
she speaks patois now because she's been
Come
there
on,
so
because
for
she's
so
there
long.
so often.
Yes, so she speaks patois, and then I took some of my Cameroon relatives to Jamaica recently. I had my 40th
Yeah.
birthday party in the grill,
Awesome.
and we were speaking pidgin. People were understanding what we were saying. We're speaking because Cameroonians speak pidgin
Right.
too, and they
Right.
can understand us. I kept telling, I've been telling them for years that there's similarities. I can understand patois, parts of it,
Yeah, yeah.
because of my West African background. Like I'll
Right.
give you a word. Pekin in West
Hmm.
Africa, West African pidgin is child.
The
In
picnic. Right.
Pygmy, yes. So my mother, like when she started taking me to Jamaica, I would understand patois parts of it, and she was like,
Yeah.
"Why?" I was like, "Yeah, because I speak West African pidgin, so I can pick up something. You dede is in pidgin is you dede,
Yeah.
yeah, I
You did
did,
it.
yes, yeah."
There.
So I
So it's
understand parts of it. So it's just funny how there's so many similarities, and you'd be
yeah.
surprised how people don't realize it until they come in,
Right.
until they come into contact with another
Connection.
person, and they go, "Oh, wait, this is similar." Like
Yeah.
people are not. Again, it's only because of social media that people have become even
Right.
more educated about these similarities,
For sure.
and these things, and it's beautiful to see it happen. I don't know if you saw there are many viral videos like this, but the most recent
Mm.
one is of a Haitian band. I think they're like a
Uh-uh.
band or something, and they
I
were
haven't
playing
seen this.
compa, like
Okay. Yeah, yeah.
and a Nigerian lady. I'm confused about whether the Nigerian lady is related to one of the bandmates or
Yeah.
something, but she was the caption was something about how similar compa is to some polyrhythmic music genres of
Wow.
West Africa, and she was dancing to
Yeah.
compa. And this became a whole thread about
Yeah.
Nigerians talking about how similar compa sounds to Afro beats and
Come
things like that. That video
on.
went viral. Like they were like
Yeah.
mixing it with Nigerian Afro beats and everything, mixing
Right,
the
right.
compa with it. But I'm seeing so many of those examples, so many of those videos going viral on social media. People go, "Oh
It's
wait, you
real.
guys, oh you listen to that? Oh wait, that kind of
Yeah.
sounds like compa, or that sounds like Afro
Right.
beats." There's
Right.
this wild exchange happening. Like what you're describing
Hmm.
happening at Davidson when in our college days is happening now on a much bigger
Much larger
scale,
scale.
and
Yeah.
it's remarkable to see it. I don't remember
Well,
what your question was. I just wanted to call that out.
no,
But
no, this is a vibe now. I forgot my question too. Throw that away. Like I was because you got me thinking about a couple things. Like one, I thought about Honorable Louise Bennett, who should be a Jamaican national hero and isn't yet, but she should be. And
hmm
she taught often about the African roots of the Jamaican dialect. So, for example, we will say "dotty," meaning like dirt, but
hmm
that's also a tree word from like the Kan people in Ghana. So like there's a lot
oh,
of
okay.
connections in that sense. But then when you talked about Kampa, it made me think about how obsessed I've been all year with Bad Bunny's latest album, and
hmm
like just listening to it. And at first, I was saying to my wife, I was like, maybe it's just like the Taino blood is just flowing between both of us. Like I was like, this is just speaking to us in the same way. But there's so much of the songs on that album, especially this one song called like Cafe Con Ron. I was like, I just feel this. I don't know what he's saying in Spanish,
Right,
but
right,
I
right.
just feel it on like a spiritual level, like the like
hmm
connection to this music. I'm
hmm
like, I don't know why I like this song so much, but I love
Yeah,
it.
yeah, yeah. And you're not the
Mm,
only one. I hear that from so many people. Like, hey, I don't
mm,
understand what's being said here, but
yeah,
as a black person, I feel it. Like, we think about
yeah.
Afro beats with like artists like Davido
Come on,
and
Thames or somebody,
Burna Boy,
Burna Boy,
Thames,
right?
Wizkid,
Mm-hmm.
and they're doing lots of collaborations, like
Yes,
transnational collaborations with
that's
artists
right.
in Jamaica and other parts of the world.
Mm-hmm.
Drake with I think like Popcorn and
Popcorn, yeah,
things like that. So like those collaborations are already happening, and I think the
yeah,
music industry has already caught on to it, and
for
they're
sure.
capitalizing on it.
Yeah.
So they figured out how to make in the music industry. They figured out how to kind of join these artists. Usher and what's this guy's Afrobeats artist name in Nigeria? It'll come to me. They recently did a song together.
Uh-huh.
So they see that happening in culture and they're capitalizing on it. And I
Yeah.
think that we are almost the last. We who are we're living
Come
this every
on.
day. We're not actually capitalizing on this, and that's
My
what
head
Black
to
and
it, yeah,
Borderless aims to do
for
is to
sure.
do that. there's a chapter 2 of Black and Borderless. I'm evolving it into something that I want
Come
to talk
on.
about, but I want you to get your questions out first before I talk about
No, no,
what
it's
that
it's
is.
all good. It's all good because it sounds like you're doing well out from my lens. Like this is like soul care work. This is healing
Mhm.
work for the community.
Mhm.
So what role do you see Black and Borderless in that role of like healing so much of the journey, the trauma? It's not
Mhm.
easy to migrate to a place. It's not easy to be displaced from a place.
Mhm.
What role do you see Black and Borderless in play in terms of like the healing between expats, Black expats, and migrants?
Mhm. So this is going to sound very like practical and not conscious or whatever,
Here
but I think
for
I'm
it.
a very practical stage I think in my life. I don't know if it's
All good.
about me being 40 and just thinking like from an economic standpoint at all points.
Sure.
But I think that healing can happen, and I think there are organizations that already exist that
Mm-hmm.
are doing so. Even
Mm-hmm.
just
Mm-hmm.
like I said, Ghana, just as with the pushing the return of people of the diaspora, I think is already doing that to a great extent.
Right, right.
Encouraging travel to Africa. Where I see a space is in the economic part.
Yes.
That's why I see the white space right now. So what I'm trying to evolve Black and Borderless into is almost an organization that helps make economic partnerships
Great.
or facilitate economic partnerships. And specifically because I work in, excuse me, my kids are giving
You're
me a
good.
bad cold. Because I work in comms and communications, PR, marketing, that's kind of
Mm,
my day job and what I do. What I want to start off doing is creating almost like an advertising or communications agency
mm,
that helps people who are business owners in the diaspora
mm,
market their products to those on the continent and vice versa.
mm, mm.
And even within the diaspora, like from the US to the Caribbean and other parts of the
Got you.
world.
Got you.
So I think that the healing that you're talking about, the social healing, I think that's already being done
Mm,
on a really grand scale by lots of really
mm-hmm.
awesome organizations. And I initially started in that space, but I'm
Yeah.
realizing that it's a little bit crowded, and I'll just kind of adding to the noise of that space.
Mm-hmm.
And I think where I guess you can call it economic healing needs to happen, economic
Yeah, yeah.
collaboration needs to happen for us to really, really move forward. And that's a space that I really want to play in the next
Mm-hmm.
5 to 10 years.
Yeah, I hear that. I hear that. So, for someone who's watching this and listening to this, and they're also a practical minded person, like what are some practical ways people can begin building those connections? Like this all sounds amazing, but for that
Hmm.
person who hasn't yet traveled outside of the
Hmm.
US even, like
Hmm.
what can they do before, or really to prepare themselves for
Yeah.
this sort of exchange?
I say start with your profession or start with what
Mm-hmm.
you're already doing. As I said, I had to start from my profession. I said, okay, I have this
Mm-hmm.
grand, dream to, reconcile, the African diaspora, but that's pretty big, right? But what about
Mm-hmm.
if I start from my trade, what I do best,
Hmm.
or what I'm already
Yeah.
doing, which is that I'm a marketing and communications person? What if I create
Mm-hmm.
an ad agency that
Right.
helps these brands, African American owned or Black owned brands in the US connect
Mm-hmm.
with consumers in the US? So I think with every person, they need to do that exercise of, okay, what am I already doing? And then how can
Mm-hmm.
now that apply that to the healing or to the solidarity of people of African descent?
Yeah.
So you as your work, do you work in your ministry or as a
Mm-hmm.
chaplain, how do you make that connection? Is it that you connect with other people doing similar work in Africa and you guys
Mm-hmm.
start a joint ministry,
Right. Right.
So
Right.
I think on a very practical level is to start with what you're good at, because when you start kind
Mm-hmm.
of bigger, it becomes overwhelming and you feel like
Yeah.
you can't solve it. But when you start with what
No
you're already
doubt.
doing, you say, okay, so I'm X, Y, and Z. I'm a chaplain. I'm a PR professional. I'm a doctor.
Mm-hmm.
What can I do? What are, who are my counterparts in other parts of the world who are of African descent that I can collaborate with, and what problems can we solve together?
Come on. Come on.
And that's another thing that I want to talk about, that there's so many common problems that I
Yeah.
think that are shared between people of African descent.
Mm-hmm.
Right now I'm working on a series that I'm trying to pitch to a few publications where um, let's say an environmental activist in Louisiana connects
Mm.
with an environmental activist in Ghana in the Volta region.
Yeah. Right. Right.
And this is
Right.
actually a real partnership, so it's
I
not
was
like a
about to say that's real
hypothetical thing.
stuff. That's real stuff.
Yeah,
That's real
there's like
stuff.
a Cancer Alley region in Louisiana that is a
Yeah.
predominantly Black area that,
Right.
due to industrial pollution, people there
Mm-hmm.
were, of course, unfortunately getting sick. And in the
Yeah.
Volta, in the Volta River in Ghana, there's been
Yes.
pollution in the Volta River, and there's an activist there.
Clothes washing up. Right.
Yes, so this is a similar problem, but with people in opposite corners of the world almost,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Mm-hmm.
But two people of African descent who are facing the same issue,
That's
the
right.
same form of marginalization, who are fighting
Mm-hmm.
for the same cause. How do you bring
Mm-hmm.
those two people together, and how can they help each other solve their respective issues and
Right.
come together? So I think every person needs to do that exercise. Every person of African descent needs to ask myself, what am I doing in my country? And
Mm-hmm.
is someone who's Black, who's on another part of the world experiencing the same issue? And how can I collaborate
Mm-hmm.
with them to solve this issue?
Right.
I think that's where you can really start from. Um,
Yeah. I love that. I
mhm.
truly love that. So tell us a bit about you previewed it earlier, but like tell us a bit about that chapter two, where you see
Okay.
Black and Borderless chapter two, because I was
I,
intrigued.
I'm previewing something that I haven't launched yet, Chris, but I'm going to do it anyway because that's what
Exclusive.
I do.
Exclusive.
Yes.
Here we
Yeah. You
go.
heard it here first. um,
Exactly.
so, no, I essentially want to create a global Black advertising and PR agency. I've worked
Here we
in
go.
advertising and PR agencies my entire career, for most of
Mm-hmm.
my career. I would say not my entire career, but
Got you.
um, and I see a white space there. I see
Mm-hmm.
really awesome agencies playing, catering to African American consumers, maybe with some global presence. And I see really great advertising agencies catering to consumers on the continent. And so it's like kind of
Mm-hmm.
siloed, I feel like at this point. And I don't see, and I could be wrong, maybe there's one out there, but
Yeah.
from the audit that I have done, I don't see one that actually goes to brands and says, hey, I can help you reach a global Black market. Like
Come
you
on.
can come to us and I can help you find consumers, not just in the US, but in Africa,
Mm-hmm.
and, kind of identify different segments for you and create this kind of global Black um, consumer ecosystem for you. I've not
There it
seen that
is.
yet. And I think that there's a wide space for that. And again, I'm choosing that because I have expertise in that space, right? And it feels like an
Right.
authentic space for me to play in.
Right.
And there's a wide space there that I can really own. And as I always say, communication is can't be taken for granted. If you're going to build a global Black economy, the people in that economy need to be able to communicate with each other, right? As
No
they trade
question.
goods and sell their goods. So I feel like I'm playing a role in creating that economy by helping people communicate their
Mm-hmm.
goods and services across borders, essentially. So
Right.
that's chapter 2. That's where I'm going.
That is so exciting to me. You started talking, and I just pictured like my brain started thumbing through an Ebony magazine and just seeing all like the ads in it and just thinking about
Mm-hmm.
the ways in which that sort of space that you're describing is so desperately needed. Like Black people the world over are doing incredible, remarkable, brilliant
Mm-hmm.
things, but it's like a tree that falls in the forest and no one's there to observe it. You know what I mean? Like
Yeah.
we need
Yeah.
that infrastructure, and PR plays a large part in that to make sure that
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
our
Mm-hmm.
greatness is being distributed in the way it needs to be distributed. You know?
To each other, yes, not just
To each
like to the
other.
world, but to each other. Yeah. Like
Yeah,
you need to
yeah.
know that there's a product in Ghana, a hair product. If you're looking for a product for your beard, I'm gonna be
Right, right.
I'm
You know
picking
what I'm
on you
saying?
today, Chris, but
I appreciate you. Appreciate you. I can't,
you,
this
you,
this
you,
don't
you,
stay moisturized by
yeah,
itself.
if
I
you
need
want to
the
stay
good
moist,
name
you
products.
need to know that there's a product in, by some manufacturer or some, entrepreneur in Ghana who creates products for, beard oil for
Yeah,
men. And you should be
right.
able to access that. Why can't you have access to that? That's how we,
Saying
create this kind of economic relationship between people who have, the same skin color as us, but live in another part of the world. So why are we not doing
exactly.
more of that? So
Yeah, for
communication plays
sure.
a huge role in that, you know.
Right, right. Absolutely, absolutely.
Hmm.
So just thinking about this journey
Hmm.
and being able to like communicate your vision to, here with the exclusive, but like even everything you've done thus far with Black and Borderless, what has it taught you about what's possible, especially when people of African descent come together across borders?
It's taught me that just, simply great things are possible when people of African
Hmm.
descent come together. I've witnessed it in my own life, like I said,
Hmm.
from
Hmm.
my family background.
Yes.
I'm one of them. I'm just kidding.
Right. That's real. No, talk your talk. I'll vouch for
I'm one of the good things that's
that.
come through such a
Exactly.
collaboration.
Exactly.
No, but on a serious, no, I've witnessed it time and time again.
Hmm.
During my school days, even the
Hmm.
collaboration between, like you said, Caribbean students and African students
Right.
on campus. I've seen that happen, and I've seen great projects come out of that.
Hmm. Hmm.
I'm seeing, even when there isn't any collaboration, just on social media, as I said, these kinds of
Hmm.
viral videos and things happening. Even those things feel really great and grand.
Yeah.
Something as simple as a compa artist and a Nigerian coming together and making
Hmm.
music. We're seeing it in the on the charts in music. We're seeing that happen. Like
Hmm.
big hits are being rolled out
Come on.
musically because of these collaborations.
That's right. That's
So
right.
it's happening. We just need to, like I said, leverage it economically and create
Mhm.
an autonomous Black economy,
Yeah.
as lofty as that sounds. But
No, no, right. But if to me, I don't think a dream is worth pursuing if it doesn't seem impossible.
hmm hmm
You
hmm
know, like
hmm
if you have a dream that's like easily attainable, you're not dreaming big enough.
Yep,
You know,
absolutely.
so
It
I'm
should
right there
scare
with you.
you a little bit. Like you should be
It
a little
should.
scared. Yeah.
It should.
hmm
You should be like, what's going to happen? Like you should
Right,
feel
right,
that.
right. You should
Otherwise,
feel it in your
we gotta
chest a
keep
little
reaching.
bit.
A little bit, a little bit, a little
Yeah,
pause. You
yeah,
know,
yeah.
definitely.
Yep.
So where can people connect with you and Black and Borderless and become a part of this movement? Like, how can folks get locked in?
So they can hit me up personally. So I'm available and accessible on LinkedIn.
Mhm.
Catherine is my full name, although Kate is like the short form of my name. Catherine
Gotcha.
Endely. You can find me on LinkedIn and link up with me there. I'm pretty open there. Also, the website for Black and Borderless, blackandborderless.org. You can also go there and visit and see the projects that we're working on currently
Mhm.
and inquire about more. Um, you can do email by now for me. I would say do Catherine Enderly at Gmail for now. We're also
Mhm.
setting up some, email addresses and things like that for Black and Borderless. But for now, Catherine Enderly at
Mhm.
gmail.com works, or on LinkedIn, you can find me, or go to blackandborderless.org to read more about what we're doing and what our mission is.
That's exciting stuff. That's really exciting stuff. So excited to check it out. Excited to support it. And excited to be investing into the work across the diaspora with you. Yeah, Kate. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Chris. I really thank you so much for, reaching out to me. This is a great opportunity. I love what you're doing here. This is great stuff.
Thank
I've
you.
listened to some other episodes and I'm really inspired and I'm proud of you as a big sister.
Ah, appreciate that.
So
Appreciate that.
great
That means a
work.
lot. That
Great
means a
work.
lot.
Yeah.
For sure, for sure. And if you too are listening and want to be inspired, or even if you want to be proud of me, that's nice too. I appreciate it. You can go ahead and watch us on baddestchaplain.com, also on YouTube, also on Apple Podcasts, Spotify Podcasts, and wherever you listen to podcasts. Just go ahead and listen, y'all. Until next time, y'all be safe out there, be blessed, and take care of yourself. Until next time, peace.
Thank you. Thank you.